A reading from the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 1, verses 1 to 5. Long ago, God spoke to our ancestors in many and various ways by the prophets. But in these last days he has spoken to us by a Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom he also created the worlds. He is the reflection of God's glory and the exact imprint of God's very being, and he sustains all things by his powerful word. When he had made purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much superior to angels as the name he has inherited is more excellent than theirs. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
And our reading this morning comes from the first book of John, chapter 1, verses 1 to 4. We declare to you what was from the beginning, what we have heard, what we have seen with our eyes, what we have looked at and touched with our hands, concerning the word of life. This life was revealed, and we have seen it, and testify to it, and declare to you the eternal life that was with the Father, and was revealed to us. We declare to you what we have seen and heard, so that you also may have fellowship with us. And truly our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son Jesus Christ. We are writing these things so that our joy may be complete. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
So, as I alluded to in the notices, we are beginning our new series, The Human. What we want to do is give a Christian vision of what it means to be a human being, what it means to be humanity. Because how we answer those questions is going to impact and influence how we perceive things to be right and wrong, good or bad, and all that sort of thing, just, unjust, and all the rest. Now, let's just be honest for a moment. That's kind of a bold, effort, right? To present a Christian vision of what it means to be human. Maybe some of you are sitting, watching, or whatever, thinking okay, Peter, that's a bit bold there to think you're gonna do that. I'm just gonna be honest. What I'm going to put forward in the next few weeks, I offer to you for your discernment and your discretion. Like anything else, I'm just another person, and these are some of my thoughts, some of my opinions. And as it's been said, opinions are like armpits. Everyone's got a couple, and sometimes they stink. And so this is just a Christian vision. There are Christians who will disagree with me. They'll disagree with what I'm going to put forward. You might disagree. However, I think it's probably good, right, and sort of something in integrity, there's an integrity piece about it, and saying, this is where I'm coming from. This is, as your vicar, as your parish priest, this is how I understand what the Bible has to say to us. This is how I understand what the community of Christian faith for the last 2,000 years has said to us. This is what the community of Judeo-Christian faith actually has brought to us. So this is just my offering to all of you. Now, before we go any further in the series, one of the fundamental questions we also have to ask is, how do we know stuff? So I'm going to offer you what I understand as a Christian, as a biblical vision of what a human is, or what it means to be human or to be humanity. And you might ask, well, how do you know that, Peter? And I'm going to take it even a step further. And well, how do we know anything? Not just how do we know one thing, but how do we know anything? And the kind of fancy schmancy word for that is epistemology. Epistemology. This is like the science or the studying of how we know, and how we have confidence that what we think we know actually is reliable knowledge. Epistemology. It's kind of like, it asks the question, does it stand up? How does it stand up? How does a truth claim stand? How is it that we know anything? Well, I'd like to suggest a few things. First of all, we know things generally by observation and definition. So, observation, this many and this many is this many, right? We just observe that. Whether you call this two, duo, dos, ich, ni, in Japanese, whatever, this many plus this many is this many. This many, take away this many, is this many. That's just, you observe that, right? You just observe that. And then in that observation, we've cultivated language. And some things we know because of definition. So we've called this many 2. And 2, add 2, is 4. Because the definition of 4 is this many. That's the definition. Or let's take another thing, like the sky is blue. Well, blue is just the definition. This jacket is green. It's just green by definition. And of course, there are varying shades of blue and there are varying shades of green, but we in the English language have defined this color as being green and the color of the sky as being blue. Now, here's a funny question. What happens if I go, look, the sky is blue, and you go, yes, it is blue, but the color I'm perceiving is different from the color you're perceiving, but we're both calling it blue? Whoa, mind blown, right? And so this enters into this whole kind of thing that our knowledge, what we know and what we understand, is not an independent endeavor. We don't go about knowledge alone. Our knowledge is communal. And so while me and my friend, let's pretend I'm the colorblind one, but I've got a friend who says, that's blue, and I go, yep, that's blue, but I'm colorblind, and what I'm seeing is actually different from what they're seeing. We kind of go, well, what is blue? And in community, we try to discover most accurately what blue is. And so we have certain rules in our community for arriving at reliable knowledge. And in our culture, we prioritize the scientific method and the rules of logic to do that. And that's a good thing. So what we've done is we go, well, let's ask the question, what is blue? And then we create a hypothesis, right? Well, I think blue is, this color, but maybe we get a little bit more scientific and we go, I think blue is this frequency of light wave, right? And then we take that hypothesis and we test it. We create an experiment and we test our hypothesis, and then we observe the results, we interpret them, and then draw a conclusion about the accuracy or reliability of our hypothesis. And then we have a theory. And then we test that theory in a lot of different environments and in a lot of different ways to see how it holds up. Because everything we know until we don't. Everything we know because it seems to work until it doesn't. So like Newtonian physics, that's how the world works. That's how everything is. And so we use that theory of physics to understand our world, and it worked and it was true until it stopped working. And Einstein comes along with theories of relativity. And physics changed. And that worked. And that was true until it stopped working. Until it wasn't true. And we started looking at like quantum stuff and quarks and bosons and all kinds of stuff that I don't totally understand. I don't totally understand it at all. I don't even a little bit understand it. I'm just throwing out words like I'm smart and I know what I'm talking about when really I've got no flipping clue whatsoever. Right? And so what we hold is true. We have a scientific process within which we arrive at a theory that we take as true insofar as it's robust enough to keep working. And it's true until it's not, which is fine. Now, that works for sort of our material observations, but then we have rules of logic when we're interpreting those observations and when we're discussing our observations or our conclusions. And we have all kinds of logical fallacies, right? And we have all kinds of rules of logic. And those rules make it so that whenever we have a conclusion, that conclusion is sound. So, mathematics is all just logical equations. This many, add this many, equals this many, right? That's just a logical argument. If you have 2, and you add another 2, then you have 4. And there are all kinds of different rules. I'm not going to go through all the different logical fallacies that there are, but if an argument is logical, this is really important for just a moment, bear with me. Just because an argument, though, is logical, in other words, it doesn't break the rules of logic, doesn't mean the conclusion is true. It just means that the rules of logic haven't been broken. If one of your premises, and a premise is just a statement, like if I have 2, that's premise 1, premise 2, and I add another 2, that's premise 2, conclusion, I then have 4, right? I mean, there's more steps to it than that, but just for simplicity's sake. Now, if I'm not looking at quantities, and I mislabel something. Say I call this many 2. If I have 2, and I add 2, then I have 4. That, though logical, is incorrect because I have a flawed premise, because this isn't 2, it's 3. Does that make sense? A little bit? Just because an argument is logical doesn't mean the conclusion is true. If the premises are flawed, they are inaccurate, they are wrong, or if crucial premises are missing, and we don't know that they're missing, we don't know they exist, then our logically valid conclusion can be false and lead us into error, which is why we say it's true until it's not. It's true because it works until it doesn't. Okay? Equally, just because a logical argument is flawed, the argument is flawed, doesn't mean the conclusion is wrong. Have you ever had this with a child, where a child rightfully identifies something, and you kind of go, wow, how'd you know that? You're like quite like some primary school child makes some sort of profound statement, and you go, wow, what made you say that? And then they give you their reasoning, and it's just bonkers. It's absolutely just nonsense. And you go, well, you had the right conclusion, but your way of getting there was just rubbish. What in the world? Right? So while we tend to elevate science and logic, actually, science and logic only bring us so far. They only bring us so far. What we always need is something or someone who comes along and rounds out our premises. Right? What we need is testimony. What we need is testimony. Now, bear with me just one moment. I'm going to come over here. Now, I've talked about how science and logic are the ways that we know things. There's a logical fallacy. It's called reification. Ooh. And the logical fallacy of reification is making something. It's like when you take something that isn't a thing and you make it a thing. And one of the ways that we do the reification fallacy regularly is called the pathetic fallacy. Now, the pathetic fallacy isn't like, that fallacy is pathetic, what a nerd. Who would ever bother to use that fallacy? That's pathetic. It's not that. It's having to do with the Greek word pathos, which has to do with sort of feeling, right? Feeling. And the pathetic fallacy is when we generate a feeling towards a thing that influences how we think about it. And in particular, it's about giving sort of personal qualities and personal attributes to something that is not personal at all. And in so doing, we create a sympathy or an empathy for that thing and give it a greater weight than it might otherwise receive. I'd like to suggest for just a moment that we have done this with science. We use the pathetic fallacy with science all day, every day. This phrase winds me up to no end. Well, science tells us. No, it doesn't. Science doesn't tell us anything. Science isn't a person. Science isn't an intelligence. Science is a category of study. Science is a method of testing. It's a method of trying to arrive at knowledge. Science isn't a thing. Science isn't a person. Scientists tell us things. And we've almost mythologized science. And it's almost like we have this, we wouldn't dare call it a God because science is agnostic at best and it really leans atheistic. But over here, we get really upset and really wound up about the idea that, a prophet goes off on a mountain or into a cave and in some sort of mysterious process arrives at some bit of knowledge, some bit of revelation, some bit of insight, some bit of information, and then comes out and says, this is the word of the Lord, this is the knowledge, this is the revelation. And we go, I don't know about that. But a scientist, instead of going into a cave, can go into a lab, do nothing we really understand, just like the prophet who goes into a cave or goes up a mountain in our imagination and does nothing we understand. And the scientist comes out of the lab and says, thus saith the science. And we go, I don't understand that. Don't worry, science tells us, but I'm not sure if I'm not sure if that works. Listen, the science says, and I've got all of these other scientists who agree with me, right? So just take the vaccine, and that's a great idea, actually. Let's be honest. That's a great idea. I wouldn't oppose that. Likewise, the religious person says, actually, thus saith the Lord. And here are all these other prophets, and here are all these other Christians, here are all these other people who have heard this and they're saying, listen, this is the truth. We go, no. Can I suggest for a moment that we prefer the one over the other because we have a feeling that with science we can have control? Science is impersonal, though we attribute personhood to it too frequently, and troublingly so. We've mythologized science. But science is impersonal. And so it's a tool that we can wield for our own devices. God is personal. God is not one that we can wield and manipulate and control for our own purposes. I think for us that's the difference. And we might say we don't like the idea that there's a special group of people who know something about God and then tell us about that and tell us something about ourselves, when in actuality we're 100% comfortable with that because we allow a group of people who do something we totally don't understand at all to come down and say, actually, this is truth. And we go, okay, yeah. I'm not down on science. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not at all. What I'm down on is thinking that we're treating science somehow differently than we've treated the way humans arrive at knowledge for millennia. And what I'm pushing back against is privileging scientific knowledge over other ways that human beings have arrived at truth for millennia. Just because something is logical doesn't mean it's true. And one of the things that we have learned and that scientists have discovered using the scientific method is that there's a whole lot more we don't know than we do. But we rely on testimony. We rely on the testimony of scientists. Because I don't understand viruses. Like, really. Beyond like a year 7 level. Yeah. And so I need the testimony of scientists. And I need to weigh out their testimony, understanding that they're interpreting their observations in order to draw conclusions. And in that interpretation, a very human thing is interjected. Likewise, someone has an experience of God, or someone has an encounter with God, somebody has some sort of revelation from God, and they have an interpretation. And I've got to say, actually, that's been mediated to me through a human being. And so I need to discern that. And actually, we need to discern that all together. And just like we're willing to take a scientific testimony about gravity, about the planet, about geology, about climate, or whatever else, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, what I'm saying is just as we receive that testimony and bring that into our list of premises, within which we are drawing conclusions, wanting to avoid logical fallacies like giving personhood to something that's not a person. Equally, we don't want to deny personhood to the God who is person, who is a person, who has personality. We want to bring all of that testimony together in order to have the most and best information within which we are drawing conclusions, being humble and knowing that our list of premises will never be complete. And though our conclusion may be logical or scientific, it doesn't mean it's true. That's why we had the readings that we had this morning. Because we discern truth as a community together. And we have witnesses of God. One of my favorite quotes is by a guy called Abraham Heschel. It says, "There are no proofs of the existence of the God of Abraham, only witnesses." People have witnessed God. The author of Hebrews says, in the past, God spoke to our ancestors at many times and in many ways, but in these later days, for the author of Hebrews, he has spoken to us by his Son. God has given testimony to himself. He has revealed himself to people who have then shared that testimony with us. And that testimony has been recorded. It has been preserved. It has been protected. It has been propagated, and all other kinds of P words that keep it going, right? So that you and I can share in that testimony and bring that together as we are considering what it means to be human. And John writes in his letter, that which we have seen, which our hands have touched, which our ears have heard, our eyes have seen, that is what we declare to you. It's no different than a scientist in a lab who comes out and says, we discovered the Higgs boson. I didn't see that. I don't believe it. I wasn't in that Swiss mountain tube. or whatever it was. I didn't see the particle, I didn't see the bosom disappear on one end and reappear on the other one. I didn't see that, so by golly, it didn't happen. It's not true, and I'm not going to allow it to affect my life in any way, shape, or form, and I'm not going to orient my life around its consequences. And I'm going to reject anything that might impact my life that's rooted in the notion of a Higgs boson. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. All there were is this team of scientists who come out of the mountain and say, ta-da, it's true. And I'm supposed to believe that? What a load of pucky. If I did that, if I said that right now and meant it, most of you would go, what a religious whack job. This guy is crazy. And what I want us to know is these men and women have said, this wasn't even in a mountain. This wasn't in a cave on the top of the mountain, some deep, mysterious. Listen, Jesus lived and he walked and he ate with us and he went on boats with us and he performed miracles and we saw him dead and we saw him alive. It was public stuff, man. And that stuff we've seen, that stuff we've heard, that stuff that we've felt, that's what we're telling you. And it's not just about Jesus. As reliable as all of that stuff about Jesus is, the whole of the Bible is reliable. Men and women telling us what they have seen, what they have heard, what they have witnessed of God. We would be absolutely foolish to not bring that into our consideration of what it means to be human and what a thing humanity is. And so here's the takeaway. What's the takeaway, Peter? You've said a lot, and you've talked about science, and I don't even understand, and doggone it, can't you just share like an 8-minute reflection? Jane and Caroline do such a good job at that, Peter. Could you just and they do, they're fantastic. I'm so glad for Jane and Caroline. But let me just offer this to you. This is your takeaway. To what degree are you willing to consider the testimony of this book? Have you just written it off? Why? Is what it takes to consider its truth any different from what it takes to consider what we call scientific truth? Is it actually any different? Or have we just privileged one over the other? Because science we can wield and we can control, and science can serve us. And God won't be. Is it actually a matter of control? This morning, let's open ourselves up. Let's be reflective. What are the voices we've silenced as we consider truth? What are the voices we've pushed out to the side? Will we bring them together? Bring them in. And will you, with me, open yourself up to a Christian vision of what it means to be human that might challenge you, might challenge me? But in its consideration, might just lead us into the fullness of what it means to be human.